Welcome to Church Unfiltered with Dr. Anthony Cobbs, a leadership podcast brought to you by Breakthrough Ministry Consulting.
Hey, welcome to Church Unfiltered. We are powered by Breakthrough Ministry Consulting, where we are seeking to help you to help others. We're so glad that you have tuned in once again to Church Unfiltered. We are excited about this podcast in which we are attempting to help church leaders, church members, those who want to get unfiltered answers or direct answers to questions you may have about church and church leadership. As we do with each episode, we want to answer questions that are sent in by our listeners. We have a couple of great questions that I want to get to before we dive into our content of the day. And so let's take a look at these questions, or take a listen to these questions that come in from one of our listeners in Ohio. One of our listeners in Ohio sent these two questions. Number one, how do I disagree with my superior without being disrespectful? How do I disagree with my superior without being disrespectful? And of course, for clarity's sake, this person is in a church staff setting or a church staff situation, and they are asking, how do I disagree with my superior without being disrespectful? What a great question. We first and foremost thank you for sending that question in. This is something that is it really doesn't matter if you are in a church setting, you are in a corporate setting, it doesn't matter. Anytime you want to address your superior, there are some things to consider, especially when you are in disagreement with that person or you disagree with something that he or she has said. I think it's pretty universal to say this, that whatever you decide, whatever you determine that you want to share with your superior, that you do it prayerfully. It doesn't matter if you're in the corporate world or in the spiritual world. If you are a believer, you know the importance and the power of prayer, because what that does is put you in the mindset of making sure that you are approaching that person in the right time and in the right spirit. And so having said that, pray. Make sure that you are prayerful in how you approach, or is it even the right time, or is it even the right opportunity to approach that person? Here's another reason why I started it off with that. Because sometimes when you pray about the situation, you may discover that it's not as big of a deal as you may think it is. It could be that the time that you take to pause and pray or meditate upon what you are thinking about doing, you may discover that, why are you in disagreement with that? Is it that because you don't like the idea? Is it because you didn't come up with the idea? Or perhaps it is something that is worthwhile and you determine, you know what, I really do need to say something about this because it would be detrimental to the organization as well as individuals. If that is the case, then you definitely want to proceed. Here's what I want to encourage you to do. If you are going to approach your superior, whether it is a conversation of agreement or disagreement, you want to always approach them with respect. Approach them with respect. Now, some people, it's a little harder to respect them because even though they may have the position, they don't lead well. And it is very difficult to have conversations with them or for them to receive feedback of any kind. What you have to do is, one of the things that we have learned in the leadership world, is you have to lead up. Leading up requires you to understand your role, your approach really can determine and cause an effect, if you will, from that particular individual that you are approaching. In other words, how you approach someone is really determining how that person might respond to you. I would just simply make sure that you set aside some time or ask the person, can I get some of your time? Can we get a moment in which we can talk? Here's one thing that happens a lot of times in churches with certain type of leaders. Sometimes it's hard to get a meeting with that person in general, but then it's also hard sometimes to get a meeting with that person by themselves. You may have to give feedback, or may have to open up a conversation or a discussion, and there are other people in the room. That's extremely difficult. We're going to reserve that for another episode. I'm going to talk specifically to leaders about that, about the significance of making sure that people can approach you directly. That is a passive leadership style in which other people have to be involved. but that's another episode. So if you have to approach your superior, you want to make sure that you are doing it prayerfully, you are doing it with respect, but then you have to make sure you are doing it with clarity. Make sure you know what you want to say. Here's what happens a lot of times with leaders, especially pastors. You only have a few moments to tell them what you want to talk about. You probably only have a good 30 to 45 seconds to get your statement out, get ready for that rebuttal, because oftentimes we already come with an answer. We're ready to respond. And again, that is a leadership flaw that many leaders in general, but especially a lot of pastors sometimes will have. Why? Because we are wired to give answers. So we're automatically thinking of an answer, and it takes practice to actively listen to a person, and especially someone who is coming with feedback. Another aspect of that in a church setting, when you are approaching someone and that you disagree with, you have to keep one thing in consideration, and that's why your prayer time is so important. Pastors are used to hearing negative things all the time. They're used to hearing negative things about the way church went, the way things are going, the building project, the this and that. They're used to hearing negative things more often than people realize. So when you want to approach them with feedback, you have to make sure that you are doing it in a delicate, gentle way. The Bible tells us that we are to approach each other and to talk to each other in a gentle way. And it's okay to give feedback, but make sure you are doing it prayerfully. Make sure that you are taking the time to really make sure that is the time for you to say something. You are doing it respectfully, even though the person may be callous or in their leadership. You have to recognize that is your boss, that is your superior, and you need to approach them respectfully and speak to them in a gentle manner. And then, of course, you want to make sure that when you give feedback, when you approach your superior, that you are doing it clearly. You are clearly stating what it is that you want. You may only have a few seconds to state it, and make sure that you have your why. Why am I saying this? Why? What is the benefit of me bringing this feedback to you? And don't take it personal. You may not get the response that you are looking for, but make sure that you don't take it personal. I hope that helps. We'll talk about that in another episode. I really want to get back to talking about that. We'll talk about that in another episode. Question number two. Listen to this question. I like this question. I feel like I am not in the right role, but I enjoy working for the church. How should I handle this? I wonder if those two questions are related from the same person. I wonder if those two questions really go hand in hand. But if you are someone who feels like, number one, that you enjoy working for the church, you enjoy being on church staff. I have a book that's coming out later this year that's talking about working on church staff. It's nothing like it. It's awesome. But also what comes along with that is that you have to understand the weight, the heaviness of working for church staff. There's a responsibility that comes along with that. So with that responsibility, you want to make sure that you are in the right seat. It's not a good thing for you to operate and you're not in the role that you are thriving in. I'm not talking about surviving. You want to make sure that you are thriving in the role that you are in. So I want to encourage you. You have to make sure that if that is not the role for you, that you have the courage to say something. Now, again, if your supervisor or the person that is over you is not someone that you feel like you can confide in, or you feel that you're going to get a negative response, then you have to follow the Matthew 18 principle, if you will. If you know that you can't approach that person because you're not going to get the response that you need or that you're hoping for, perhaps you need to seek wise counsel and go with someone else and say, hey, can I sit down with you? This is where I am. I love the church. I love being a part of the staff, but I don't feel like I'm in the right place. That a good leader is not going to look for an opportunity to say, oh, okay, well then you can go you can go somewhere else, you can leave. A good leader is first and foremost going to try to reassign. It's going to try to help you to get into the right seat. Now, that's not always possible because perhaps there's not the resources to be able to do that, to be able to keep you on staff if that's not the job that works for you. But a good leader is going to try to, first and foremost, make sure that you are not experiencing that and feeling that because you don't have from the organization the things that you need to be successful. That's what I always make sure that I do. If someone comes to me, which that's only happened on a couple of occasions over the course of years and years of being in executive leadership, that where someone has come and they say, you know what, I don't know if this is working out for me. And I discovered quickly in both of those cases or a few of those cases that it was because of the resources that they needed. They needed their capacity stretched. They needed to be challenged differently. And so when we began to focus in on stretching them and equipping them, then they turned around. And there was only maybe one or two times where we had to move someone or someone was not a right fit for the organization. Again, a good leader is going to make sure that he or she tries to see, is this a challenge for this person to stretch their capacity and their understanding of themselves and of the role? Or is this a situation where we need to reassign? And last resort, maybe this is a situation where the person doesn't fit the culture as a whole. And that's okay. It's always better to find out than to drag it out over the course of years and a person or persons are in the wrong seat. And many people listening right now know that there are some folks that you know of that are on church staff or even at a corporate setting that are far beyond, have overstayed their welcome, overstayed their time, and are no longer effective in what they are assigned to do. So those are some great questions. I hope those questions are helpful. If you have any questions for Church Unfiltered, we would love to try to give you an unfiltered answer. Submit your questions to info@breakthroughonline.org. That's info@breakthroughonline.org. And we will do our best to answer your questions. Well, it's time to get into our content for the day. Our content for the day piggybacks off of our last episode in which we talked about communicating during a crisis. Today, this particular crisis of the time of this recording of this podcast, we are still dealing with the coronavirus, the COVID-19 outbreak, the great outbreak of 2020 that has just totally transformed the life of churches and organizations alike, and individuals as well. And I want to look at 4 what ifs. I want to ask 4 what ifs to consider in the coronavirus crisis. I want us to ask these questions because I think it's important for us to at least start thinking about how would you respond? What would you say? What would you do with these particular what ifs? We want to look at these 4 what ifs as we enter into another week of dealing with the COVID-19 outbreak. First and foremost, we want to thank God for church leaders who are seeking wise counsel, praying before taking action, and making sure that they are diligent in checking on the congregation they oversee. There is absolutely nothing easy about this season. This is a tough season, and it is not over yet. There are many things to consider leading up to these past Sundays when people had to make the decisions to whether or not to close down, to have online service, all of these different things. But there are some what if questions that I want us to consider heading into the new week. I want us to consider these 4 questions. The first what if? What if someone in your congregation contracts COVID-19 or coronavirus? This is a high probability. It doesn't matter what size of your church is. It really doesn't matter. You could have 2 people or 20,000 people. The possibility of contracting COVID-19 coronavirus is high for all of us. That's why we are under the restrictions that we are under. That's why we're taking the precautions we're taking, because it is probable. And so probable that you will come into contact with someone or touch a surface or whatever the case may be that might cause the sickness. Quite honestly, this is a scenario that can change the entire direction of church gatherings. However, if this does happen, there are several steps that you can take. Number 1, you want to pray for the person and do not shun or shame them. This is not about pointing fingers, judging people, making people feel bad. That's not what we are here to do. We are the church. We are here to serve, to encourage people, to make sure people have what they need. It is of the enemy for us to try to judge people and try to make them feel bad for something that they did not control. It's no different than any other sickness. If they didn't have anything to do with contracting it, they didn't know. And so we want to make sure we show love to our brothers or our sisters. Then the next thing, announce respectfully. Find a way to announce respectfully that there is a member or members who tested positive. You have to get your communication team together, come up with something that is direct, that is honest, that says it specifically, that does not go around it and try to beat around the bush. No, we have a member who has tested positive, and this is what we need to do. Here's what I would suggest. Don't put their name out there. You don't want to put their name out there. You do your own investigation behind the scene, and you put in certain protocols behind the scene, but do not put people's names out there. That's not what we're here to do, because people don't know how to handle that a lot of times, and you might end up seeing them plastered all over social media and all of that. We don't want to do that. So behind the scenes, you'll work together with your team to trace the steps of the individual to determine contact with others. You want to make sure that once you find out who has tested positive, you help to trace their steps. Who did they come into contact with when last you met in church? Did they come into contact with multiple groups, multiple individuals? And then how do you relay that information to those individuals that they need to take precautions as well, which at this time, those precautions seem to be, if there's no symptoms, there's no sickness, that it is just being mindful and maybe self-quarantining just to make sure that there are no symptoms that develop. You want to discreetly contact those who were in contact and help them to get tested or help them to go through this and understand, hey, you need to be mindful of what's happening. And be aware if there's some symptoms of some things that come up. You need to be careful and make sure that you get yourself taken care of and looked at. Then communicate open and honestly. I spoke about that just a minute ago. You want to be open and honest with the church. Don't go to a place where you are hiding things or keeping things in the background. I mean, some things have to be confidential, and you don't tell everything. That's understandable. But with something like this, when it is a national emergency, we're trying to prevent the spread of this thing. It's just bottom line. Some things are just going to have to be handled openly and honestly, but it would always protect the dignity of the individuals. Okay. Restrict all services and interactions until the situation is controlled. If you have someone in your congregation who tests positive, you need to make sure that you take extra precaution to make sure nobody else is contracting it, because now it is, okay, wait a minute, it's at home. We've got to do some things differently. Then you might want to consider having the staff, including the pastor, leadership, even tested and monitored for the virus as well, making sure that everybody is good. Everybody is taking responsibility, and there's a sense of calm and encouragement that comes from leaders, making sure that they are showing that they are looking out for their own health and making sure that they're taking the test and doing all the things that may need to be done as well. All right. So the first thing, if the what if question, what if someone in your congregation contracts COVID-19? You want to make sure you show love to them. That's the first thing. Please do not. This is not a witch hunt. This is not us going after folks. That's not what this is about. We're all trying to get this all in control. And so it is about making sure that you show love. And this is applicable to anything, whether it's any kind of sickness or someone has gotten in trouble, anything like that. We want to steer away from gossip. We want to steer away from hurtful comments and things that we say and do. Our job is to build people up and to make sure that people have what they need. So even if this wasn't about Corona, if this was about someone getting in trouble, someone failing, someone doing something that they shouldn't have done, or someone having some other kind of sickness or something, we want to treat it with love and gentleness and make sure that the truth is sought after, and we handle this thing and handle that person with dignity. Second, what if? What if the authorities officially ban gatherings? What if authorities officially ban gatherings? What if the government puts out a mandate? I know right now in legalese talk, we are debating whether or not churches should still are exempt from closing and all of these different things. We're not going to get into all that. Although I will say this, this is me. This is my thought. I will say this. You have to recognize, pastors, when you gather people together, you are taking on a responsibility. You are gathering people together. And so if that is contracted, it is you who called that meeting together. It is you who called that service together. And so you really want to think about that. That is you taking, or do you really want to take on that responsibility when everything around you is shutting down? Everything around you is saying we're not going to take a chance like that and responsibility like that. And I heard one preacher, one pastor, a couple of pastors I have talked to and heard from, one thing that they said is it actually takes more faith to close. Now, I don't want to get into a debate about that, but it actually takes more faith to close because you have to depend upon the Lord to take care of that church. I'm not saying that you should stay open, closed, but I want you to understand when you call people together, you are taking the responsibility that is possibly exposing people who don't even know you are exposing people to this possible illness. So what if the authorities come in and say, you got to shut it down? As of right now, that has not been mandated, but according to right now, the CDC has gone from 50 people, no more than 50 people gathered, to no more than 10. It's a delicate situation right now. So if that happens, we have no choice. If the authorities shut it down, then you really have no choice. Right now, you have a choice. But one of the things we can do, pray for our officials nationally and locally, move formally to online services, which many churches are doing, partner with the church that has mastered online service so that you can make sure that you are ready to go if that does happen. Because you don't want the church to stop. You don't want the work of ministry to stop. But if you are mandated to close down, which is a high possibility, then you need to make sure that you are ready to still be able to minister, still be able to move as a church. You can use all kinds of online resources like Zoom for meetings. And if you are on our email list at Breakthrough Online or Breakthrough Ministry Consulting, you can get on our email list. And I sent out several resources regarding this as well. And you are more than welcome to join our email list if you have not received any of that information. So another what if, a big what if, let's keep going. Another what if is, what if people stop giving financially? What if people stop giving financially? Let's be honest, most churches, this is Church Unfiltered podcast, so I'm going to say this. I'm going to say it. Most churches can't afford to close their doors. Churches have staff to pay, buildings to pay for, and unfortunately, many churches live Sunday to Sunday. Just like individuals may live paycheck to paycheck. And if you lose one paycheck, you may be in trouble. You may lose your house, your apartment, whatever the case may be, because you're living paycheck to paycheck. A lot of churches are living Sunday to Sunday. They depend on each weekly income, each weekly offering to even survive. That's not a good place to be in. Just like the individual, that's not good for you to live paycheck to paycheck. You ought to have savings in the bank. I think some financial advisors say 6 months of savings. If you don't have 6 months of your expenses in the bank, if something happened to your income right now, what would you do? Where would you go? What would happen? So the same thing happens with churches. If the people suddenly stop giving, if you had no income coming in, what would you, church leader, what would you do? What would you do? Because this is quite honestly, when you have a pandemic, when you have an emergency, a national emergency, people are going to first and foremost want to make sure that home is taken care of. They're going to want to make sure that, listen, I'm about to lose my job. I'm about to, or they're about to lay us off, or whatever the case may be, and they need to take care of home. So what if people stop giving? think there's a few things we can kind of suggest so that we pray that the Lord helps us to lead and not overwhelm the people. We have to lead and not overwhelm the people and not make them feel guilty. Remember, they have to take care of their home as well. And so we don't want to make them feel guilty, but at the same time, we do recognize we are believers. We believe in supporting the work of ministry through tithes and offering or grace giving, whichever one your church what church supports. But we want to make sure we don't overwhelm people. You want to check with insurance companies. Now, I've looked into some of this. It's very rare that people will have a policy that would be able to kick in with this kind of circumstance, honestly. So most of us do not have. We have flood insurance, we have fire insurance, all of that. We don't have pandemic insurance. And so a lot of times the insurance company, but there may be some clause in there that allows from some unusual circumstance. Check with your insurance company to see if that's possible, that there can be something that can kick in that can help. Inform, here's a tough one. Inform all contracted workers that there might not be any pay during any shutdowns. Anyone who is working on Sundays or on worship days may be in a situation where they may not be able to get paid. Now, some churches are in a position where they can keep people on for a certain amount of time. You may have to stagger it. You may have to say, hey, if this thing goes on 2, 3, 4 weeks or more, then we're going to have to start reducing, and we may eventually have to cut. It's unfortunate. It is unfortunate that this is even a possibility, but when people are on payroll and there's no income or the income significantly drops, the reality is the only way to survive in most cases is to reduce your expenses. Listen, you all, this is all a faith journey. We know that the Lord is going to bring us out. We know that weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. But he tells us to be prudent. Go and read Genesis when Joseph was given a dream. He was given a dream and told the king, hey, there's going to be a famine in the land. We need to stock up for 7 years because there's going to be drought that is coming. And so they did that, and they were prepared for the drought seasons. I want to challenge every person listening now. I want to challenge every pastor, every leader. Are you preparing for things like this? Did you prepare? Because most of us, the reason that we're being caught off guard is because we didn't prepare like that. We had nothing in the bank. We weren't prepared for online service. We weren't prepared. And so now it is catching us. And that's why it's so important to have a Joseph-like wisdom and make sure you are preparing for things that may come. All right. So make sure congregation members are able to give electronically. That should be a given now. You should have some kind of way that people give electronically. Most churches that I've worked with, consulted, we've helped to move them from envelopes and cash offerings in a tin or a basket to online giving, to make sure that people, because most people don't carry cash or most people don't carry a checkbook, but they do have their debit card, or they can go on their phone and quickly make a donation. All right. Teach the members how to be wise in their own personal finances during a crisis. You want to make sure that individuals are able to take care of their own finances, their own personal finances. So we don't want to do this. Here's what we don't want to do as church leaders. We don't want to be so consumed with telling people how they can give to the church that we don't minister to them and how they can make sure that their household is taken care of. What good is it going to do for us to make sure to keep pointing out, give to the church, give to the church, give to the church, and these people are sinking at home? Very important for us to not forget that, because so again, when we are going through an emergency like this, people's jobs may be in jeopardy. They may have lost their income. All these different things may have taken place at home. And if the only thing that they're seeing, or the primary thing that they're seeing when they contact their church, or they look online and they see advertisements in Facebook and all sorts of things from their church, and they see ways to give, and they are hurting themselves at home. They are hurt at home. We need to help them. So make sure that part of ministry is what are the resources out there. We know that there's maybe a stimulus check coming and things like that. And are there some grants? Are there some resources? There's some different things that can help people in their individual lives that can be a blessing to them. Don't forget to minister. When you're talking about money, don't forget to minister to these folks about their own personal finances and what's happening at home. And then, what if people stop giving? Be honest with staff on when a shutdown would possibly impact payroll. Please make sure that you inform people ahead of time. Please make sure that it's not just a cutoff like, oh, I guess this week y'all not getting paid. Come on, we know better than that. If we have any kind of budgeting skills, if we have any kind of savvy there, we should be able to project we can go this long at this rate. At this point, we need to stagger it. We need to go down to 75%, 50%, whatever the case may be. If you have someone who knows what they're doing budget-wise, accounting-wise, finance-wise, they should be able to tell you that. If you don't have that, then that's when you partner up with some church that does have that, or ask for help. You should be able to. Don't just cut people off. That is not how the church should operate. So the what ifs. We've had 3 what ifs. What if someone in your congregation contracts COVID-19? What if the authorities officially ban gatherings? And what if people stop giving? And here's the 4th one. This 4th one is unusual, but I want to share this and then we'll wrap this up. The 4th one is this. What if this situation is an opportunity for a church to merge with another church? Isn't that a strange what if? But that's a great what if. I believe in my heart, this is a season. We have a window of opportunity. I've been believing this for a while as I've been doing consulting and working with various churches and denominational organizations. I believe that this is a season that some churches should merge together. What if this moment presents churches with the opportunity to pool their resources and grow stronger? Perhaps this is an extreme, but in my experience, what I've been seeing, there are pastors who express the desire to merge with another church or express that they are in over their head. Their debt is phenomenal. The church is in a hole. They don't know what to do. They're losing members, all of these things. They don't know how to do it. They don't know what to do. And they've expressed, we'd be willing to merge with another church, but then ego gets in the way or other things get in the way, like pride gets in the way. Like, I don't want to close my church, or I don't want to merge with someone else and now I'm no longer pastor. I believe that this might be a season. Who knows? We don't know. I don't know. That's for you to determine in your conversations with God, if you are a pastor or a ministry leader. But even if you are a church member, maybe that's the feedback. Maybe that's the approach that you need to pray about. You need to pray about, like, maybe is the pastor being instructed, or is he aware that that's even a possibility? You don't want to see your church die. And so I think it's important, if there's opportunity, if there's a church down the street or a church across the street and both of you are struggling, why would we do that? I remember going to Chicago. I was doing some training there and doing some things working there. And I remember driving down I don't even remember what street it was, but I got in town as church was letting out. And I will never forget seeing all the people streaming out of probably 20 churches. All these beautifully dressed people just coming out of these churches, because it's like they all got out at the same time. It was kind of crazy. I'm driving down the street and I'm seeing all these little churches along the street and people coming out of the churches. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder how much their light bills are. I wonder how much their water bills are. I wonder all the expenses that go into managing these 20 churches. What could they do if they merge together? Even if 5 of them merge together or whatever the case may be, what could they do with the resources that they are putting out now just to keep the buildings open? And what could they do if they did it all together? I'm just saying, I don't know. Maybe again, that may be extreme, but you have to pray. You have to pray and don't do anything out of a knee-jerk reaction, but use wisdom and have guided conversation and wise counsel. Meet with church leaders, engage their thoughts. Meet with other pastors and have honest discussions about the state of your churches. Assess the church's debt, savings, and assets to see if it can sustain a worst case scenario. I don't anticipate this, and I pray that this is not the case. But what if this thing gets worse? Or what if we have another type of situation like this? We've gotten a glimpse of how bad things can get and how quickly they can get. I think about Italy. Are we praying for our brothers and sisters over in Italy? The whole country shut down and people are in their homes and they can't even go out on the streets. And I think about that. I'm like, what would we do if that was America? What if that was us? How would that impact the church climate? What would we do? Now, we pray to God, of course, that does not happen. And we pray that Italy comes out of that. We pray for all of our brothers and sisters around the world, definitely. But we need to understand something, that sometimes God will show us moments, opportunities that we can take advantage of, that we can make things better. We can make things stronger. I think that we are in that, definitely seeing that with the digital world, that now we have come out of the walls and we didn't even plan on it. And we've come out of the walls and most churches are now online, which is absolutely incredible. A month ago, you didn't have all these churches online and now they're online. It's incredible to think about. What if this is a window for people to consider merging with another church? That's between you and God and you and the other pastors. If you are a pastor listening to this, now if you're a member, I don't want you to do like our question at the top of the hour. I don't want you to approach your superior. I don't want you to approach your superior without prayer. We're not saying that that's what's the formula or that's the solution for every church. That's not the case at all. But there are some who would probably benefit from that conversation. Well, I'm so glad that you all were able to join us on today. And these 4 what ifs, are not meant to scare us or to do anything like that. It is simply for us to begin to think about what if someone in our congregation contracts the virus? What if the authorities shut us down officially? What if people stop giving? What are we going to do? What if this is an opportunity to merge with another church or do something else different with our ministry? These are things that we want to consider, things we want to look at. And again, I offered a few tips in reference to each of those what ifs. But we want to make sure that we have opportunity to give you any resources that you may need. We're here, Breakthrough Ministry Consulting. I am here for you if you need anything. If your church needs anything, we definitely want to provide resources for you. But we want to pray together. We want to make sure that we are seeking God's wisdom and God's will. And it's okay to ask questions like this. It's okay for us to ponder and try to figure things out. And then let's come together as pastors, as leaders, as ministry workers and staff members. And let's come together and try to figure out so we can get ahead of this thing. We are praying for you here at Church Unfiltered. We are praying that God will have a mighty move in your church's life. And we're praying for each and every one of you individually that we will get through this rough season, this rough time that is here in our world. And we will be even stronger on the other side. Until then, till our next episode, we thank you from here at Church Unfiltered. I'm Dr. Anthony Cobbs, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Church Unfiltered with Dr. Anthony Cobbs. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. For more resources related to today's topic, visit churchunfiltered.com or follow Dr. Anthony Cobbs on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.